Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
I don't think when the Four Nations tournament first came to an idea for the NHL, but I'm pretty sure Gary Bettman could not have envisioned it going way better than this tournament just went. I thought it was pretty amazing to, they really sold that as like Olympic style hockey. And man, those fights, you can't tell me that wasn't scripted, man. They just set that up, and it was perfect for the NHL because, the Super Bowl just ended. There was nothing on sports wise. Nobody cares about the NBA All-Star game, which was great for one night to see the NHL say, "Hey, NBA, sit down, little brother." So I thought it was a great time, great atmosphere. Connor McDavid winning it. I thought that was pretty amazing. And with that, welcome to episode 23 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Sabrin, joined by my cohorts, Devin Little and Tony Wolak. Guys, that was some fun hockey.
Yeah, that about sums it up. A lot of fun hockey. Not just the last game with USA and Canada, but across the board. Finland and Sweden had their good games. Lucas Raymond continues to show the hockey world that he is if he's not already a superstar, he's on his way. And our Dylan Larkin, Red Wings fans have been watching this kid for 10 years at this point, and I think that this might be the moment that everyone else is starting to catch up. He really made a name for himself with Team USA and finished the tournament as the Americans' top line center. I remember it wasn't that long ago that people were telling me he was a third line center. Great hockey, great Red Wings focused things to come out of it. I know we haven't had Red Wings hockey, specifically them in a couple weeks, but if this is what we're going to have, moving forward with this international hockey, I'm ready. Give me more.
I was sitting there watching, and in the third period of the championship game, you see Larkin out there with Austin Matthews and Brady Tkachuk and all the key minutes, and I'm like, yeah, it's about damn time. This is the player that we've been watching, and good. He's getting that same treatment on the international stage, and it's exactly what you want to see as a Red Wings fan,
Yeah, it's crazy how they sold this, man. It's so Olympic style, and if you guys watch today, they couldn't play that Herb Brooks video from Miracle enough times on the broadcast where they just interspliced from the movie into real shots of the real locker room now. And yeah, dude, it was fun. And I think, for the first time, and you might cringe a little when you say it sometimes, but Gary Bettman did it good, I think there's people that are really happy about this. I think it was planned out perfectly. I think it was flawless. And the hype that it got out of just what seemingly came out of nowhere it was fun hockey, man. Felt like the Olympics again.
I also think it goes to show that no matter what the situation is, whether it's the Olympics or an event that you basically conjure up out of thin air, when you wear your nation's colors, you are going to play your best. It is an honor to represent your country, and you see that every single time these players get the opportunity to do so.
So now that the tournament's over, Red Wings hockey is back. The team returns to action on Saturday against the Wild. They host the Anaheim Ducks on Sunday before facing the Wild again on the road on Tuesday. Then they have Columbus on Thursday. So if you're counting, that's 4 games in 6 days. And then once you know it, Stadium Series is Saturday right after that. So 5 games in 8 days out of the break. It's good they got their rest. Well, at least everyone except for Larkin and Raymond. But this team is going to see quite a bit of action right away as they start the second half of the season and continue their push for the playoffs. But guys, I gotta say, I know it may be an uphill climb in some ways for the Red Wings, but I'm feeling pretty good about this. They're on a roll with Todd McClellan, and depending on where you look for their playoff chances, it looks pretty favorable compared to what we certainly saw earlier in the season, but even going back to last year too. So it's going to be a fast and furious pace down the stretch.
Absolutely. Just within this week, you've got some really winnable games. The Wild are no pushovers by any means, but that's a team that if the Red Wings are expecting to be a playoff team this year, they need to be able to compete with and beat. And then the Ducks, they're still in the league's basement. That's a team that you need to count that as a W. You can't afford to see that flip to an L. And then the eve of the Stadium Series, that game against the Blue Jackets in Detroit. That's a winnable game. You're at home. There's all the anticipation about the next game, but that's going to be one where you got to stay focused on the task at hand. Don't get too excited and start looking ahead at what all the fun you're going to have in Columbus. But there's 8 points on the line between now and the Stadium Series. And I think the Red Wings have a really good chance at getting a majority of them. And I would even make the argument that they maybe should they should get probably 6 out of 8 of them, if not more.
Yeah, and looking at just the rest of the Eastern Conference and how things are playing out this year, the goal for the Red Wings is 92 points. That should put them into the playoffs. Whether it's the first or the second wild card, we'll see, but that should be enough just to cross that threshold that they barely missed out on last year. And that means playing at a 574 pace down the stretch, which, if you look at the 3 teams leading the Atlantic Division, the 3 teams leading the Metropolitan Division, they've all played at or above that pace so far this season. So if the Red Wings want to be a playoff team, they got to play at a playoff pace. And speaking of Devin's point, at least 6 points in every 5-game sprint, that should be enough. That's a 600 points percentage pace. So yeah, I think that's certainly feasible over the final 27 games. And one thing to add to Devin's point about the upcoming games this week is you face the Wild twice. They are not going to have Kirill Kaprizov. They're not going to have Ryan Hartman. Joel Eriksson-Ek may still be feeling the flu effects from the Four Nations tournament. Lucas Raymond might be too. We'll see. But you're playing a team that doesn't have a couple of their best players, so it's not a must-win game by any stretch. But the Red Wings should be able to win. They should be able to beat Minnesota. They should be able to beat Columbus. They should be able to beat Anaheim. And like Todd McClellan was saying this week at practice, let's see what team we are and how we're going to respond down the stretch of the season if we're a playoff team or not. So these first 5 games should be a good test of like how much confidence and how much drive this team has to accomplish that goal.
See, if you look down the stretch, though, Red Wings opponents have a .587 win percentage, 27 games left. So if they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to earn it. You have 2 against the Capitals, 1 against the Stars, 2 against Vegas, 3 against Carolina, 2 in Minnesota, 2 in Florida. So those are some big names they're going to have to beat down the stretch. So I'm not as optimistic as you guys are, but I'm a little worried about this break too. Like I felt like the Red Wings are really finding a groove here, and we'll see how they respond coming out of this 2-week break.
Like you said, Tony, I'm interested to see if Raymond is feeling any effects from that Four Nations flu that was going around. I'm interested to see if Larkin has any fatigue or anything like that from going all the way with Team USA. Now that these are just 2 players out of a 21-man roster, or a 20-man roster rather, but they are also your 2 most important forwards. So hopefully they're at 100% or very close to it, because as you just illustrated there, Evan, the Red Wings can't afford to be undermanned, so to speak, in terms of the health of Larkin and Raymond.
And to that point, one of the key things that they need to focus on down the stretch is improving their 5-on-5 offense. And obviously, Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin are key components of that. But if you look at their play under McClellan, they're still in the bottom half of the league for goals for per 60, scoring chances for per 60, and high danger chances for per 60, all at 5-on-5. So, the team has been much better in some regards, like the power play, the penalty kill's been the penalty kill's been getting incrementally better. Team defense has been better, but they really need their 5-on-5 offense to start pulling a little bit more weight and can't be over reliant on the power play if they want to, win these tight games and reach the playoffs eventually. Because, look, as we saw in the Four Nations championship game, there's only one penalty called. And it's sure, the NHL playoffs, it may not be that drastic, but in playoff games, there really aren't that many power play opportunities, especially the deeper you get. So the team does need to be a little bit more self-sufficient, if you will, when it comes to 5-on-5 offense.
Apart from the 5-on-5 offense, there's a couple issues I'd like to see the Red Wings address, hopefully maybe through the trade deadline. I'd like to see a little more toughness in the second and third line. I'm so curious if all this Tarasenko talk, if that was some kind of smokescreen. I can't. I have a hard time struggling thinking if someone will pick him up or is interested in that contract. Like I said, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see them beef up, probably maybe on the defensive end too. Second line pairing, maybe. I don't know. My Marcus Pettersson dream was crashed earlier, so after Tony the trade whisperer ruined it for me.
I can't help but just think about the teams we just watched in this Four Nations thing. Now, obviously, these are all-star lineups, and you're never going to assemble a team like that. But I think about Jacob Slavin and how he really put his name on the map in a way it maybe wasn't before, and how dangerous the Carolina Hurricanes are because they have a human eraser like that on their blue line. The Red Wings have one of their own. His name's Moritz Seider, but I would say Slavin's probably a bit more developed at his craft than Seider is. And I just kind of wonder how much better the Red Wing blue line would look if they had just a more sound defensive unit. They're not going to be able to get a Slavin. That player's just not available, or even a player like that. But there's definitely going to be options out there for them to strengthen and fortify their defense. And then I do also agree with your call out about some sandpaper. Lord knows the Kachucks definitely stood out. Like you said, that first game against Canada, the whole dropping the gloves within 3 seconds, or 2 fights within 3 seconds, very WWE, but hey, it was entertaining as hell, right? I think the Red Wings could use a little bit of that. I think they could use the sandpaper. I think they could use that extra element that would provide a jolt, not just for the team, but for the fans. And honestly, I think that's probably the big piece that the Red Wings are missing, is a Kachuk type of player that isn't afraid to be physical, but also can put up, 80 points a season. Those players are not exactly a dime a dozen, but if you can find a player to up your physicality and contribute offensively, that's a piece that the Red Wings absolutely need. They're pretty, looking elsewhere in the roster, they're honestly pretty. I don't want to say they're set, because there's definitely room for improvement pretty much everywhere. But you don't want to tinker with it too much. Like you said, they were definitely finding a groove before the Four Nations break. It's kind of one of those if it's not broke, don't fix it thing. And you also want to make sure that players like Marco Kasper and Albert Johansson and Albert Soderblom still get the opportunity to play consistently and build on the success that they were having before the break. If you bring in too many bodies, depending on what's going the other way, you might see their roles diminish or disappear entirely, and you definitely don't want to see that. So it's going to be a balancing act. You're going to want to see them push some chips to the middle of the table and make an honest push for the playoffs and give their team the best chance it can have, but they still got to have an eye on the long game here and not tinker with the formula too much, because what they had going was working.
When you mentioned looking for pieces on defense, and especially one that could be, part of the future moving forward, I thought you were about to sell us on Bowen Byram again, but we have talked about that quite a bit in the past. But hey, I agree. If the Red Wings, brought him in, that would be outstanding. But to your point about not needing to make a splash, I 100% agree. Like, the Red Wings, like, they're in a unique position where they have a solid lineup as it is, how it's currently constructed. And you're right, you don't want to mess with the vibe of that too much. You don't want to mess with this team, the positivity and the flow of this team too much. And another component of that is there's a chance they still miss the playoffs, which if depending on whose playoff probability you're looking at, could be like, if there's still a 50% chance or 60% chance or 70% chance. But it's, if the Red Wings are going to be like bringing in a top 4 defenseman or a top 6 forward, there's a good chance that part of the package going back the other way is Detroit's first round pick, which I don't think that they should be giving that up right now, especially if it can fall in the range between, like, say, 13 and 20. Like, even if this draft has a less than stellar class compared to previous years, 13 to 20, you're still going to get a really good player there to be part of the future. And I don't think they're in a position right now where they are just one player away from, being a cup contender, and this player will put them over the top, like, well into the playoffs and going on a deep playoff run. It's just not it's not the right moment to trade this, and especially like at the trade deadline when prices are higher than in the off season, because there's only a few sellers and there's so many buyers competing, and you got teams who are going to be pushing for a Stanley Cup, like Toronto, Tampa Bay, Florida, Vegas, Winnipeg, all these teams that are out at the upper echelon of the league. Some of them have first round picks still, and some of them are going to be like, yeah, I'll get rid of the 30th overall pick or the 32nd overall pick just to get a pretty solid player in return. So while obviously teams know the difference about like what to expect in terms of range for that pick, the Red Wings aren't in a position of their building up, whatever you want to call it, at this stage where they can give up a potential key contributor to their team for a long time, thereafter. And I don't even think they should be trading their second round pick even. It's like they still need they have plenty of talent in their pipeline, but just a couple more, the first and the second, round picks this year, hold on to those. Anything else beyond that, sure, I'm fine if you trade that, but hold on to the valuable picks at least.
I can't see Yzerman making a big splash here at the trade deadline. I don't think it makes sense. It's just for all the reasons you said. Per usual, you guys take all the good stuff, and then I'm left with not much else to say. But no, the Red Wings are nowhere. That's a move that the Red Wings used to be back in the day when they were one of the elite teams, where we didn't see first round draft picks for a long time because they were traded to make moves at the deadline, bigger moves. So I don't think they're there yet. The Red Wings young core. We forgot to mention too that like the Red Wings are going to be in a good contract place too, with the salary cap going up, especially with their core locked down as it is now. So I think they're playing a great brand right now. If under Todd McClellan, like, why not ride this out? It's working so far, and seeing these young players develop, I think is really key to the whole process here. And we've talked about Kasper and Soderblom, all season, for the last couple of weeks, and I mean, God, these kids are performing and they're getting very valuable experience. So I can't see them. I mean, if that Tarasenko stuff was true, maybe if you could move Tarasenko for pretty much anything at this point, I want to see them stick with what's working right now.
I do think that the Red Wings do need to add a depth defenseman at the minimum. One player that I've been focused on has been Alec Martinez. He's on the Blackhawks currently, but is probably more so known for his time in Los Angeles, where he did overlap with Todd McLellan and Trent Yanni. So someone who's familiar with their coaching style, with their system. So he hopefully can be a more seamless integration compared to someone who has zero familiarity with the two coaches. But that's someone who I'd like to have the Red Wings bring in to play or at least compete for third pairing minutes with Justin Hall, with Eric Gustafsson, with Jeff Petrie when he returns. Just a little bit more stability on the back end, so that, you know, when we're watching this team and, you know, Gustafsson and Hall are out there, you're not holding your breath the entire time. But getting back to Tarasenko, so I just want to be careful about like choosing my words here, but like I do have a source with some information on the situation, and it's more so Tarasenko's relationship with the new coaching staff as opposed to his on ice play that's driving this talk, this conversation about him. And you have to remember he signed a 2-year contract with Derek Lalonde as the head coach, not Todd McLellan. And while Tarasenko did play for Craig Berube and Paul Maurice in the past, not every coach is alike, even if they have similar tactics, so you can just rub off on someone a different way. And so that's sort of where this is coming from. Hopefully over the past 2 weeks, without, you know, the team playing and this past week with the Red Wings having sort of a mini training camp, they've been able to get on the same page and they can move forward. But I really don't see the Red Wings being desperate to get rid of him just to, you know, to kind of remove a negative situation from the locker room. I think that they're going to try to everyone's going to try to put their best foot forward here. But if you're thinking that the Red Wings might be like attaching a sweetener to Tarasenko just to move him and his contract somewhere else, I just don't see that happening. Maybe in the offseason it can be revisited just to find him a new place for the last year of his contract where it's his deal's a little bit more palatable. But I don't know. I understand where the talk came from. I don't know if I see it happening before the trade deadline.
I think I agree with you. I also think that they will get through the end of the season together. I think that Tarasenko will be a Red Wing when the season is done. I think that it behooves the Red Wings to get him going for one reason or another, whether it's because he becomes the player that they signed him to be and be that steady source of depth scoring, or because then they don't have to attach a sweetener to get rid of him because teams will actually want him. Either way, you got to get him going to get there. So I think that with where you're at right now, that's your way forward. It's just a matter of how you get that done. And then to your point, Tony, considering the Jake Wallman trade still gets brought up to this day, I really don't think that the Red Wings need to be attaching a sweetener to get rid of Tarasenko unless they absolutely have to because the situation has gone beyond repair. I can't handle the onslaught of opinions out there that would happen if a trade like that happened again. Especially if Tarasenko then went to the new place and started scoring. But first and foremost, one of the things that stuck out to me that Tarasenko mentioned was when he, after he got signed, was he remembers playing with the Red Wings on his video games, playing with the Russian Five back in the day. This is a kid that used to daydream about being a Red Wing. I'm sure he was excited when he signed that contract, and even to this day, I'm sure he's not like discontent with where he's at. It's just like you said, Tony, it's a different situation than what he signed up for. But that's not the end all be all, right? Sometimes you sign up for things that aren't what you thought they were, but you still find a way forward and you make the best of it. And I think that's where both parties are at right now. Like I said, if Tarasenko becomes the steady source of offense that they thought he'd be, that's the ideal outcome. It's just a matter of producing that outcome.
Yeah, Tarasenko's obviously not the player that we were hoping he would be, but it just hasn't been a good fit. And you can obviously tell that there's something going on there behind the scenes of, him just not being the player that they brought him in to be. So I also wanted to point out that Tony and I did not coordinate wearing Nike shirts tonight. I swear to God, I promise. It's just kind of creepy and weird at this point that we keep showing up to these podcasts dressed exactly the same. So I don't know about that. Guys, another great talk with you guys. Always love hearing about it. And guys, man, you guys are going to the Stadium Series here very shortly. You guys looking forward to that, right?
Sure,
Oh, yeah.
cannot wait.
Yeah, you guys are gonna have to take some pictures, and I want to see some video content. So get you guys on TikTok, Instagram, and all that crap. So, all right, well, that's gonna wrap it for episode 23 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. And before we go, I just wanted to remind you where you can find us. Check us out on YouTube at the Flying Octopod. You can find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads under the same name. And don't forget to listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, that's episode 23 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.